The plane hummed softly as it soared through stormy skies, passengers unaware of the brewing storm inside. In the cockpit, Captain Ava Reynolds gripped the controls with unwavering focus, her every move precise, her resolve unshaken. But behind the curtain separating calm professionalism from chaos, a passenger's prejudice was about to erupt into a mid-air meltdown. What started as doubt in Ava's abilities would escalate into an act so shocking that it left the entire flight in awe. Yet, in the face of turbulence both inside and out, Ava stood tall, proving that resilience and professionalism can rise above any storm. What unfolded next would not only change the lives of everyone on board, but also spark a global conversation about prejudice, perseverance, and the power of grace under pressure. This is Captain Reynolds speaking, her voice calm and steady. Please fasten your seatbelts. We're navigating through turbulence. Curious? Stay with us as we unfold this extraordinary tale of courage and consequence at 3,5,0,0 feet. The airport terminal buzzed with life in the early morning hours, a symphony of hurried footsteps and rolling suitcases blending into the constant hum of activity. The metallic voice of announcements echoed overhead, rattling off gate changes and weather delays. Outside, rain streaked the large terminal windows, the heavy gray clouds casting a dull, somber hue across the bustling interior. Under the sharp fluorescent lights, travelers in various states of urgency hurried through the terminal, some clutching coffee cups, while others wrestled with carry-on luggage. At Gate 27, Captain Ava Reynolds stood tall and composed, her tailored navy blue uniform crisp and commanding. At just 32, Ava had recently earned her stripes as a captain, a milestone that filled her with immense pride. Beneath her neatly arranged cap, her natural curls framed a face of quiet determination. Ava moved through the chaos with an air of authority, her calm demeanor drawing a few admiring glances as she navigated the bustling terminal. Becoming a pilot had always been Ava's dream, but the journey had been anything but easy. As a black woman in a field dominated by men, she had faced skepticism, dismissive attitudes, and outright bias at times. Yet, Ava's resilience had propelled her forward. She wore her achievements like armor, every stripe on her uniform a testament to her hard work and refusal to back down. Today was one of her first flights as a captain, and despite the drizzling rain outside, she felt ready for the challenge ahead. A few gates away, Eleanor Blake tapped her manicured nails on the check-in counter, her sigh loud enough to draw the attention of the attendant scanning her boarding pass. In her late 40s, Eleanor carried herself with an air of entitlement. Her designer beige trench coat, monogrammed handbag, and carefully styled blonde bob suggested a preference for exclusivity. Her irritation was palpable as she adjusted her scarf, the soft folds failing to conceal the growing crease of impatience on her forehead. The delay was the latest inconvenience in what she saw as an already disrupted day. As Eleanor retrieved her boarding pass, her eyes casually wandered, landing on Ava nearby. She froze, her gaze locking on the captain's stripes on Ava's uniform. Her lips tightened into a faint sneer as she muttered under her breath, "I suppose they'll let just anyone fly planes these days." Ava caught the comment, the sharpness of the words slicing through the ambient noise of the terminal, Her expression remained neutral, but inside she felt a familiar pang. These moments were nothing new to her. Years in the industry had conditioned her to handle prejudice with professionalism. For Ava, this was simply another person underestimating her capabilities. Another obstacle to rise above. Without turning to engage Eleanor, Ava adjusted the strap of her flight bag and walked toward the crew lounge to prepare for her flight briefing. Her movements were steady, deliberate, and unbothered, but she couldn't ignore the weight of Eleanor's scrutiny lingering on her back. This was Ava's day to command the skies, and she refused to let anyone's bias take that from her. Eleanor, meanwhile, watched Ava's retreat with a lingering frown, her annoyance simmering as she moved toward her gate. The rain outside mirrored her mood, but as far as she was concerned, the storm brewing inside her mind was far more disruptive. The steady rhythm of boarding announcements filled the air as passengers for Flight 278 lined up at Gate 27. Captain Ava Reynolds stood at the entrance to the jet bridge, her uniform impeccably tailored and her demeanor exuding professionalism. She greeted each passenger with a warm, practiced smile, nodding politely as they filed onto the plane. As Eleanor Blake approached the gate, she noticed Ava immediately. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her steps slowing. At first, she stared, as if trying to process what she was seeing. A black woman in the uniform of a captain. The gold stripes on Ava's shoulders seemed to magnify Eleanor's discomfort. When Eleanor reached the boarding agent, she paused, her voice dripping with incredulity. "Excuse me," she said, pointing toward Ava. "Is she the pilot for this flight?" The boarding agent, caught off guard, smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am. That's Captain Reynolds. She's one of our best." Eleanor's lips pursed into a thin line, but she didn't press further. Instead, she proceeded down the jet bridge, her pace brisk, her irritation palpable. As she stepped onto the plane, Ava greeted her with the same courteous smile she had offered every other passenger. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome aboard." Eleanor's eyes flicked over Ava, her expression unreadable before she turned to the flight attendant stationed nearby. "Is there someone I can speak to about this situation?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. The attendant blinked, taken aback. Ma'am, is there something specific you'd like to address?" "Yes, there is," Eleanor replied, glancing pointedly at Ava. "I just think it's important to know the qualifications of the person flying this plane. This is an 8-hour flight, and frankly, I don't feel entirely comfortable." Before the flight attendant could respond, Ava stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. "Ma'am, I assure you that I'm fully qualified to captain this aircraft. My training and experience meet the highest standards of safety." Eleanor's expression tightened. Well, I'm sorry, but this doesn't feel right to me. I've flown for years, and this is, unusual, to say the least." Passengers nearby began to notice the tension, their conversations fading into awkward silence. A young mother seated across the aisle from Eleanor shifted uncomfortably but eventually spoke up. "I trust the airline knows what they're doing when they hire pilots," she said, her tone polite but firm. I'm sure Captain Reynolds is more than capable." Eleanor turned to the mother, her expression a mix of disbelief and indignation. "That's not the point," she said, her voice rising. "This is about safety. We have a right to ask questions." The mother gave a small, tight smile, her eyes flicking to her young son beside her. "And I have the right to feel reassured that we're in good hands," which I do. Maybe you should try relaxing a little. Eleanor huffed, leaning back in her seat, but her dissatisfaction remained evident in her stiff posture and sharp glances. Other passengers exchanged uneasy looks, a few pulling out their phones to subtly document the interaction. As the final passengers boarded, Ava and her co-pilot, Jack Miller, went through their pre-flight checklist. The cockpit was a world of calm precision, every switch, dial, and indicator meticulously reviewed. "You good, Captain?" Jack asked, his tone light but supportive. Ava glanced at him, offering a faint smile. "I'm fine, just the usual distractions." Jack smirked knowingly. "Let me guess. Someone decided they couldn't handle the idea of a competent black woman in charge?" Ava chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Something like that. Nothing I haven't dealt with before." Jack leaned back slightly, his tone turning serious. "For what it's worth, I've flown with you enough times to know you've got this. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Ava nodded, her focus returning to the controls. "Thanks, Jack. I'm just ready to get us in the air." As the plane prepared to taxi, the hum of the engines filled the cabin. Ava's calm professionalism radiated through every announcement she made, her voice steady and confident. Passengers settled into their seats, though the tension lingered, especially around Eleanor. Eleanor continued to fidget in her first-class seat, her dissatisfaction evident to those around her. She muttered under her breath, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "It's exactly why standards are slipping everywhere. It's like anyone can get a job these days." The young mother across the aisle glanced at her son, who looked confused. "Mommy, what's she talking about?" he whispered. The mother leaned closer to her son, her voice low but firm. "She's just upset, sweetie. But you don't need to worry. Our pilot is amazing." The child nodded, reassured, while Eleanor rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. Her passive-aggressive comments persisted, drawing occasional glares from other passengers. Back in the cockpit, Ava and Jack remained focused as the plane taxied to the runway. Despite the disruption, Ava's resolve didn't waver. She had faced challenges like this before and knew one thing for certain: the skies demanded focus, not distractions. With the engines roaring and the plane lifting into the stormy gray skies, Ava tightened her grip on the controls, ready to face whatever came next. The plane soared through the cloudy skies, its engines humming steadily as passengers settled into their routines. Laptops glowed softly in the dim cabin light. Books were cracked open, and conversations flowed in quiet murmurs. But as the plane reached cruising altitude, a subtle tremor rippled through the cabin, the first sign of turbulence. Captain Ava Reynolds' calm voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. We're currently cruising at 35000 feet. Due to some weather activity, we're expecting light turbulence ahead. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened for your safety." We appreciate your understanding and will do our best to make this a smooth journey." Most passengers responded by clicking their seatbelts into place, reassured by Ava's steady professionalism. But in seat 3A, Eleanor Blake gripped her armrests, her perfectly manicured fingers digging into the leather. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her eyes darted nervously toward the cockpit door. As the plane jolted slightly, Eleanor turned to the flight attendant passing by. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp and rising. "What is going on? This is unacceptable." A flight attendant, a young woman with a calm demeanor, stopped and offered a polite smile. "Ma'am, it's just a bit of turbulence. Captain Reynolds has it under control." Eleanor's face twisted in disbelief. "Are you sure about that? How do you know? Do you even know how experienced she is? This is ridiculous." The attendant blinked, taken aback. "Captain Reynolds is highly qualified, ma'am. You're in very capable hands." Eleanor huffed, her voice growing louder. "Capable hands? Have you seen her? I don't feel comfortable putting my life in her hands." Nearby passengers began to take notice, their conversations dwindling as Eleanor's voice cut through the cabin. A few turned their heads, exchanging uneasy glances. The young mother from earlier, seated across the aisle with her son, leaned forward. "Ma'am," the mother said, her voice calm but firm, "you're scaring the other passengers. Please trust that the pilot knows what she's doing." Eleanor snapped her head toward the mother, her face flushed with irritation. "Oh, really? And how would you feel if someone completely unqualified was flying this plane? I have every right to be concerned." The mother's expression hardened. "I feel safer knowing she's up there. Maybe you should focus on staying calm instead of making this worse for everyone." Eleanor recoiled, her mouth opening and closing like a sputtering engine. Around her, passengers murmured in agreement with the mother, some shooting disapproving looks her way. Others quietly pulled out their phones, capturing the scene unfolding before them. As the plane hit another pocket of turbulence, rocking slightly, Eleanor's anxiety boiled over into outright hysteria. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood abruptly, ignoring the "fasten seatbelt" sign flashing above her. "This is unacceptable," she shouted, her voice high-pitched and trembling. "I demand to speak to the captain right now." The flight attendants rushed toward her, their movements quick but controlled. "Ma'am, please sit down immediately. It's unsafe for you to be standing during turbulence." Eleanor's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Unsafe? You're talking about unsafe? That woman flying this plane is what's unsafe? I have a right to know what's going on, and I'm not sitting down until I get answers." One of the attendants, a tall man with a composed demeanor, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to return to your seat right now, or I'll have to involve the authorities upon landing." Eleanor glared at him, her eyes wild. "Authorities? Oh, you're going to involve the authorities on me? I'm the one trying to keep everyone safe here." Ignoring the attendant's warnings, Eleanor stormed toward the cockpit door, her heels clacking loudly against the aisle floor. Gasps rippled through the cabin as passengers craned their necks to watch. One of the attendants moved quickly to block her path. "Ma'am, stop right now," he said, his tone stern. "You cannot approach the cockpit." Eleanor's fury reached its peak. "Get out of my way," she shouted, shoving past the attendant. When he placed a firm hand on her arm to stop her, Eleanor lashed out, swinging her arm and striking him hard across the shoulder. The sound of the impact echoed through the tense cabin. The flight erupted into chaos. Passengers shouted in alarm, a baby began crying, and the young mother across the aisle shielded her son's eyes. "Why is she acting like this, Mommy?" the boy whispered, his voice trembling. "Some people just don't know how to behave," the mother replied softly, holding her son close. The flight attendant sprang into action, moving swiftly to restrain Eleanor. She thrashed and screamed, her voice incoherent as she struggled against their grip. With careful precision, they secured her arms with soft restraints, ensuring she couldn't cause further harm. "Let me go," Eleanor yelled, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. She shouldn't be flying this plane. She's going to get us all killed." Inside the cockpit, Ava and Jack remained focused. The commotion outside was impossible to ignore, but Ava's hands stayed steady on the controls. She adjusted the plane's course, guiding it through another patch of turbulence with practiced ease. Jack glanced at her, concern flickering in his eyes. "You good, Captain?" "I'm fine," Ava replied, her voice calm but firm. "Let's just get through this. The crew will handle her." Jack nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're a rock, you know that? If it were me, I'd have already lost it." Ava chuckled softly. "We've got 200 passengers counting on us, and nothing else matters." As the turbulence subsided, Ava made another announcement. Her voice, steady and reassuring, filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've navigated through the turbulence and expect smoother skies ahead. Thank you for your patience and cooperation." The calm of Ava's announcement contrasted sharply with the chaos Eleanor had caused. Passengers whispered among themselves as the restrained woman sat in her seat, still fuming but unable to continue her tirade. A few passengers murmured words of support to the flight attendants, who resumed their duties with quiet professionalism. In first class, the young mother turned to her son, offering him a reassuring smile. "See, everything's fine now. Captain Reynolds is taking care of us." In the rows behind them, passengers exchanged knowing glances, many still clutching their phones with videos of the incident. Eleanor's outburst had left a mark on everyone aboard, but it had also highlighted something unshakable: Captain Ava Reynolds' unwavering professionalism in the face of adversity. The cockpit remained a sanctuary of focus and calm, shielded from the escalating chaos in the cabin. Captain Ava Reynolds kept her hands steady on the controls as the plane rocked gently through the lingering turbulence. Outside, the storm clouds swirled, and faint streaks of lightning illuminated the vast expanse of the sky. Inside the cockpit, the only sounds were the rhythmic hum of the engines and the calm exchanges between Ava and her co-pilot, Jack Miller. "You're handling this like a pro, Ava," Jack said, his tone warm with admiration. "Not many people could stay this composed with all that going on behind us." Ava allowed herself a brief smile, her eyes never leaving the instruments. "It's part of the job," she replied evenly. "The skies don't care about distractions or what anyone thinks of me. They demand focus." Jack nodded, leaning back slightly. "Still, it's impressive. You've got this flight under control. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Ava's smile softened. Jack had always been supportive, and in moments like these, his steady presence felt like an anchor. "Thanks, Jack. It's just another challenge, right?" But as the plane shuddered slightly, Ava's mind briefly wandered to the earlier incident with Eleanor. It wasn't the first time someone had doubted her capabilities, and it wouldn't be the last. Her entire career had been a series of hurdles, from skeptical instructors to dismissive colleagues. Yet, every challenge had only fueled her determination to succeed. Ava's thoughts returned to the passengers behind her. Over 200 lives depended on her to guide them safely through the storm, and she wasn't about to let anyone or anything distract her from that responsibility. Her grip on the controls tightened, a quiet resolve settling over her. As Ava focused on navigating through the turbulence, her mind drifted to the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the late nights spent studying, the long hours in simulators, and the moments of doubt she had faced early in her career. She remembered the subtle glances from colleagues and passengers who questioned whether she truly belonged in the captain's seat. But Ava also recalled the people who had believed in her instructors, her mentors, her family. They had reminded her that she wasn't just breaking barriers for herself, but for every young girl who dreamed of soaring through the skies. "You've earned this," Ava told herself silently, her determination reigniting. "You've worked harder than anyone to get here, and you're not letting one person's ignorance take this moment from you." As the turbulence eased and the storm clouds began to break, Ava and Jack prepared for the descent. Jack double-checked the instruments, his movements precise and efficient. "Everything looks good on my end," he said, with us clearing up a bit as we approached the airport. Ava nodded, her voice steady. "Let's start the approach sequence. We'll have to brief the crew about what's waiting for us on the ground." The flight attendant's voice came through the intercom, updating Ava about the situation in the cabin. Eleanor was subdued, but still visibly angry, her hands restrained, but her mouth continuing to spout complaints. Passengers had calmed, though the tension in the air remained palpable. "We'll make it work," Ava said to Jack, adjusting the plane's altitude. "Let's just get everyone on the ground safely." As the plane descended, Ava's focus sharpened. The clouds parted slightly, revealing the runway below. The lights of the airport twinkled in the distance, a reassuring beacon amidst the storm. The plane touched down smoothly, the wheels skimming the wet runway with practiced precision. A collective exhale seemed to ripple through the cabin as passengers realized they had landed safely. Ava guided the plane to the gate, her movements deliberate and composed. Inside the cockpit, Jack turned to Ava, his smile wide. "Textbook landing. You made that look easy." Ava chuckled softly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "That's what they pay us for, right?" As the plane came to a stop, Ava made one final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. Welcome to our destination. Thank you for your patience and cooperation during today's flight. We hope you have a safe and pleasant journey ahead. Her calm, professional tone masked the sense of accomplishment she felt. Ava had successfully navigated not only the storm but the chaos in the cabin. She had proven to herself, once again, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As passengers began gathering their belongings, a group of uniformed security personnel boarded the plane. Heads turned as they made their way down the aisle, their expressions firm and professional. Eleanor Blake, still restrained in her seat, immediately straightened, her face a mask of indignation. "This is absurd," she exclaimed, her voice rising above the murmurs of the other passengers. "I was only trying to keep everyone safe." The security personnel ignored her protests, calmly explaining that she would need to disembark for questioning. Eleanor's face turned red with fury, but her defiance did little to sway the guards. As they guided her off the plane, passengers pulled out their phones, recording the scene. The young mother from earlier exchanged a glance with her son, her expression a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. "See?" she whispered to him. "People like her don't get to decide who belongs." As Eleanor was escorted down the aisle, Ava watched from the cockpit door, her face impassive. She felt no need to gloat or confront. The outcome spoke for itself. Ava had done her job with professionalism and grace, while Eleanor had shown the world exactly who she was. As passengers filed out of the plane, several stopped to offer words of thanks to Ava. A man in his 50s extended his hand, his expression earnest. "Captain Reynolds, that was one of the smoothest landings I've ever experienced. Thank you for getting us through the storm." Ava shook his hand, his smile genuine. "Thank you for flying with us." The young mother also paused, her son clutching her hand. "You're an inspiration," she said simply, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for showing my son what strength and professionalism look like." Ava knelt slightly, meeting the boy's curious gaze. "One day, you'll do great things too," she said warmly. "Just remember to always believe in yourself." The most important things to remember. The most important things to remember. The most important things to remember. The boy beamed, and Ava felt a swell of pride. Moments like these reminded her why she had chosen this path, despite its challenges. She wasn't just flying planes. She was breaking barriers and proving what was possible. As Ava walked through the terminal toward the crew lounge, her steps light but deliberate, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The boy had called to her, standing there making his revolve. A moment that she had emerged stronger. The storm, both inside and outside the plane, had passed, and Ava knew she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Because for Ava Reynolds, the skies weren't just a destination. They were a testament to her resilience, her courage, and her unwavering commitment to rise above. The day after Flight 278 landed safely, the story of the onboard confrontation began to spread like wildfire. By midday, videos taken by passengers had surfaced on social media, capturing Eleanor Blake's disruptive behavior and the professionalism with which Captain Ava Reynolds handled the situation. Within hours, hashtags like Captain Reynolds and Flight 278 meltdown trended across platforms, drawing thousands of comments and shares. Ava's phone buzzed relentlessly with messages of support from colleagues, friends, and even strangers. A video of her calm announcement during the turbulence, paired with her poised response to Eleanor's escalation, became a symbol of professionalism and grace under pressure. One post stood out. It was from a passenger who had witnessed the entire ordeal. "I've never felt safer on a flight. Captain Reynolds handled the storm in the sky and the storm in the cabin with absolute class. Representation matters, and she's proof of why diversity in aviation is so important." The comment struck a chord with Ava. She had always viewed her role as more than just flying planes. She wanted to inspire others who, like her, had faced barriers in male-dominated fields. But seeing such widespread recognition of her work left her both humbled and motivated. Her airline issued a public statement lauding her professionalism. "We are proud to have Captain Ava Reynolds as part of our team. Her leadership during the challenging conditions on Flight 2878 exemplifies the highest standards of excellence in aviation." By the end of the week, Ava was approached by several media outlets requesting interviews. Initially hesitant to step into the spotlight, she realized the potential of her platform to inspire others. In one interview, Ava spoke candidly about her journey, the challenges she had faced as a Black female pilot, and the importance of resilience. Her story resonated widely, and soon Ava became a sought-after speaker at conferences and events. She shared her experiences, not just about that fateful flight, but about the years of perseverance and hard work that had brought her to the captain's seat. She also began mentoring aspiring pilots, particularly young women and people of color, offering them guidance and encouragement to break into the aviation industry. "Adversity isn't a reason to stop," she said during a keynote speech. "It's the fuel that pushes you forward. If you believe you belong, no one can take that from you." While Ava's career soared to new heights, Eleanor Blake's life took a very different turn. The videos of her tirade went viral, painting her as the embodiment of entitlement and prejudice. She became known online as the Airline Karen, a nickname that quickly attached itself to every conversation about the incident. Eleanor's employer, a prominent public relations firm, wasted no time in distancing itself from the controversy. A statement was released. When the investigation was called off by police, Eleanor's previous secretary, Rachel Wynne, became the only female expert. "We are aware of the incident involving one of our employees. Our company does not condone the behavior displayed and has taken steps to review her employment." Shortly after, Eleanor was placed on indefinite leave, and within weeks her termination was confirmed. Losing her job was a blow, but the consequences didn't stop there. Eleanor was summoned to court to face charges for her actions, including assaulting a flight attendant and disrupting a flight. During the hearing, The judge emphasized the seriousness of her behavior, sentencing her to a hefty fine, mandatory community service, and a series of sensitivity training sessions. In her statement to the court, Eleanor offered a half-hearted apology. "I regret the situation and the misunderstanding that occurred. My intentions were never to cause harm." But her words felt hollow, even to herself. As Eleanor's world unraveled, she found herself increasingly isolated. Friends she once considered close avoided her calls, and family members expressed their disappointment. Social media became a battleground of criticism, forcing her to deactivate her accounts entirely. Even mundane activities like grocery shopping became fraught with anxiety as strangers recognized her from the viral videos. With no job and no social network to lean on, Eleanor was left to confront the reality of her actions. The sensitivity training sessions she was required to attend were her first real exposure to perspectives outside her own. Each session challenged her to listen, to confront biases she had long denied, and to understand the broader impact of her behavior. At first, she resisted, dismissing the sessions as unnecessary, but over time, something shifted. Hearing others share their experiences of discrimination and prejudice forced Eleanor to see herself in a new light. One day, during a group exercise, she found herself admitting quietly, "I think I let my own fears cloud my judgment." It was a small step, but it marked the beginning of a slow, reluctant journey toward self-reflection. While Eleanor struggled with her reckoning, Ava continued to thrive. Her story became a beacon of hope for aspiring professionals facing adversity. Letters and messages poured in from young women and men, inspired by her example. One such letter came from a high school student named Maya. "Dear Captain Reynolds, I've always wanted to be a pilot, but people tell me it's not realistic for someone like me. Seeing you handle that flight and hearing your story gave me hope. Thank you for showing me that I can dream big." Ava replied personally, encouraging Maya to pursue her goals and offering to connect her with mentorship programs. These moments reminded Ava of why she had persevered through every challenge. Her success wasn't just about her, it was about paving the way for others. Though Eleanor's journey was far from over, the lessons she learned began to shape her actions. She volunteered at a community center, helping to organize events and quietly working behind the scenes. While she never fully overcame her shame, she started to understand the importance of humility and accountability. One day she wrote a letter to Ava. "Dear Captain Reynolds, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to acknowledge the harm I caused. My actions were wrong, and I am deeply sorry. Watching your grace and professionalism has taught me more than I can express. Thank you for showing the world what true strength looks like." Ava read the letter quietly, setting it aside without replying. Forgiveness wasn't something she owed Eleanor, but the apology felt like a small acknowledgement of the change Ava's strength had inspired. Ava stood on the stage at an aviation conference months later, addressing a packed audience. She spoke of resilience, professionalism, and the importance of representation. "The skies belong to everyone," she said, her voice filled with conviction, "and the barriers we face only make us stronger." The applause was thunderous as Ava left the stage, her heart full of purpose. She had not only navigated the turbulence of one flight, but had become a symbol of progress, showing the world that resilience could soar higher than any storm. And somewhere in her quiet journey of redemption, Eleanor Blake carried that same lesson forward, a reminder of the cost of prejudice and the strength of rising above it. The soft glow of the afternoon sun filtered through the terminal windows as Captain Ava Reynolds sat quietly in the crew lounge, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. The hustle and bustle of the airport felt distant now, a muted hum against the clarity of her thoughts. The events of Flight 278 and the whirlwind that followed had left their mark, but they had also brought Ava a renewed sense of purpose. She had always known that her journey as a black female pilot was more than a personal triumph. It was a statement, a challenge to stereotypes, and an inspiration for others to follow. But it wasn't until the incident with Eleanor Blake that Ava truly realized the scope of her influence. The days following the flight had been filled with letters and messages from people across the world. Young girls who dreamed of becoming pilots wrote to Ava, expressing their admiration and gratitude for her courage. One letter from an aspiring pilot named Maya stood out. "Captain Reynolds, I've always loved planes, but I never thought I'd see someone like me flying them. Thank you for showing me that I can do it too." Ava had responded to Maya personally, encouraging her to chase her dreams and connecting her with resources to help her along the way. Moments like this reminded Ava why she had worked so hard. She wasn't just breaking barriers for herself, she was paving the way for others. The support from her airline and colleagues was equally overwhelming. Her professionalism during the turbulent flight and the onboard chaos had earned her national recognition. She was invited to speak at aviation conferences, where she shared her experiences and emphasized the importance of diversity and inclusion in the industry. Staying calm in the face of prejudice isn't just about proving them wrong, Ava had said during one keynote speech. It's about proving to yourself that you are capable and that you belong. The applause that followed was thunderous. But for Ava, the most rewarding part of these moments was the quiet conversations afterward. Parents would bring their daughters to meet her, sharing how her story had inspired their children to dream bigger. Young women approached her with shining eyes, telling her how they had almost given up before seeing her on the news. Ava had become more than a pilot. She was now a symbol of resilience and possibility. While Ava's star rose higher, Eleanor Blake's life took a humbler turn. The consequences of her actions had been harsh but necessary. Fired from her job and ostracized by her peers, Eleanor found herself alone with only her thoughts to keep her company. It was during her court-mandated sensitivity training that something began to shift. For the first time, Eleanor listened to stories of people who had faced prejudice every day of their lives. She heard the pain in their voices and saw reflections of her own bias in their experiences. Slowly, reluctantly, she began to confront the harm she had caused, not just on that flight, but in countless small ways throughout her life. Eleanor decided to channel her newfound understanding into action. She began volunteering at a local community center, organizing workshops and mentoring young girls, particularly those from underprivileged backgrounds. One afternoon, she met a bright, curious girl named Alicia, who shared her dream of becoming a pilot. Alicia's excitement reminded Eleanor of the girl she once was. eager to conquer the world but burdened by self-doubt. Eleanor encouraged her, sharing stories of resilience and determination. Stories she had once dismissed, but now found herself drawn to. The work didn't erase the mistakes of Eleanor's past, but it helped her take steps toward redemption. One evening, Eleanor sat down and wrote a letter to Ava. "Captain Reynolds, I want to acknowledge the harm I caused you on that flight. My actions were born out of ignorance and fear, and for that I am deeply sorry. Watching your grace and professionalism inspired me to confront my own biases, and I hope you know how much of an impact you've made. Thank you for showing me and the world what true strength looks like." Eleanor didn't expect a response, and Ava chose not to reply. For Ava, forgiveness was a necessary part. She had already moved on, but Eleanor's words stayed with her. A small testament to the ripple effect of standing tall in the face of adversity. Weeks later, Ava strolled through the airport terminal, her flight bag slung over one shoulder. She had just returned from a speaking engagement where she had shared her story with a room full of aspiring aviators. As she walked, a small voice called out from nearby, "Excuse me, are you a pilot?" Ava turned to see a young girl, no older than 8, staring up at her with wide, awe-filled eyes. The girl's mother stood a few steps behind, smiling apologetically. "I am," Ava said warmly, kneeling down to the girl's level. "Do you like aeroplanes?" The girl nodded vigorously, her curls bouncing. "I want to be a pilot too, just like you." Ava's heart swelled with pride. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small winged pin with her airline's logo on it. "Here," she said, fastening it gently onto the girl's jacket. "This is your first set of wings. Keep working hard, and one day you'll be flying planes too." The girl's face lit up as she clutched the pin. "Thank you, Captain." The mother mouthed a silent thank you to Ava, her eyes glistening with gratitude. As Ava stood and continued on her way, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Moments like these reminded her why she had fought so hard to overcome every challenge. Meanwhile, Eleanor sat in the quiet of her small apartment, reflecting on the choices that had led her here. Her work at the community center had given her a new sense of purpose, but the shame of her actions still lingered. She knew she couldn't undo the past, but she hoped that her efforts might help others see the world differently. As she scrolled through old news articles about Flight 278, Eleanor paused on a photo of Ava, her uniform crisp, her smile radiant, as she accepted an award for her contributions to aviation. Eleanor's chest tightened with a mix of regret and admiration. She had once doubted this woman, yet here Ava stood, unshaken, unbreakable, and undeniably inspiring. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt a flicker of hope. Change was slow, but it was possible. She resolved to keep learning, to keep listening, and to ensure that her actions moving forward reflected the lessons she had learned. For Ava, the skies remained a symbol of boundless possibility. Her journey had proven that resilience and courage could overcome even the fiercest storms. And for Eleanor, the path to redemption was far from complete, but each step forward brought her closer to understanding the true meaning of humility and growth. Their lives, once briefly intertwined, had taken separate paths, but the lessons from that fateful flight would echo in the lives of everyone it had touched, serving as a reminder that strength, grace, and the willingness to change could leave a lasting impact on the world.